Hello, lab experts. Welcome to the RoK Diagnostics Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything medical laboratory science from around the world. I'm your host, Robertson Klinger, and today we'll talk about a disease that affects mostly populations of African descent, a disease that affects about 150,000 babies in Nigeria every year, a disease that has wreaked havoc in Africa for a very long time. It's sickle cell anemia. Without much further ado, let's talk MedLab. So, what exactly is sickle cell anemia? Sickle cell anemia is a disease that affects hemoglobin in our bloodstream. You may know hemoglobin as the molecule that helps carry oxygen to different organs of our body, to different tissues. Without hemoglobin, we would die. So, what exactly happens when people have sickle cell anemia? First, let's talk about the normal condition. Under normal conditions, our hemoglobin fills up our red blood cells, and our red blood cells have generally this shape. They are biconcave, they are circular, they are flexible, and they can pass through different capillaries, veins, and arteries in our bodies without any sort of issue. There are situations where the hemoglobin in our red blood cells becomes abnormal. One of the possible abnormalities is that it becomes what is known as hemoglobin S. When the hemoglobin in our body turns into hemoglobin S, then we tend to have red blood cells that have this shape. They are sickle in shape, and they become particularly rigid. They become particularly sticky. They stick to each other. They're not able to flow through our bloodstream, and so that eventually causes blockages in our veins, arteries, capillaries, and prevents oxygen from getting to where it's actually needed. Under normal circumstances, people are mostly what is referred to as AA. So they have normal hemoglobin, normal red blood cells. When they have sickle cell anemia, they're referred to as SS. They have abnormal hemoglobin and this sickle shape as far as the red blood cell goes. Now, there is an intermediate state. People can be AS. That means they have the sickle cell trait. When you have the sickle cell trait, you have a mixture of normal red blood cells and also abnormal red blood cells. So the situation you want to stay out of is this situation. You want to be here or sometimes here. You don't want to be here. People that have sickle cell disease have a lot of symptoms that actually prevent them from living normally. We'll talk about that possibly in another episode. But speaking in more practical terms, what effects can sickle cell disease have? Well, sickle cell disease and even sickle cell traits can actually affect who you can marry. Why? Because it's a genetic disease, and as a result, it can affect children. Let's talk a little bit about that. If you're in a situation where you have parents and offspring, if both parents have normal hemoglobin, meaning that they have AA hemoglobin, then what you have is a situation where their children, all of their children, will also be AA. And so in that particular case, there is no sort of issue, there is no problem. Now, you can have a situation where parents, both of the parents, have sickle cell traits. That means that they have the second condition, which is both parents are AS. They have a mixture of normal hemoglobin and also abnormal hemoglobin. In that state, if they mate, what's going to happen is their children are going to be AA, AS, and SS. And it's possible to calculate the probabilities of those children being AA, AS, or SS. 1/4 of the time, the children are going to be AA. That means if you have 4 children, there's a very high chance that at least one of them is going to be AA. If you have 4 children, 2 out of them are very likely to be AS. And if you have 4 children, 1 out of them is very likely to be SS. That's why it's not recommended for parents that are AS to marry each other. And that's why you need to know your status before you actually get married and before you decide to have children. So this is a situation where we have one parent that is normal, AA, and then one parent that has abnormal hemoglobin, SS, all the way through. In this situation, they get children that are all AS. You can see each of them has half of each characteristic. And so every child has the sickle cell traits. Here, the mother has sickle cell disease, and here the father has normal hemoglobin. Now, this is the absolute worst case. Two people who are SS getting married because all their children are going to be SS. Now, it's important to say that in today's world, we have ways of treating sickle cell disease, for example, bone marrow transplants, but those are extremely expensive. In Africa, it's not done very often. And also, parents can't afford it. So, prevention is better than cure. Stay away if you're SS from anyone that is also SS, and as a matter of fact, from anyone that is also AS. So that was a summary of what sickle cell anemia is and what the practical ramifications of this disease are. Remember, you can suffer from sickle cell anemia, you can have normal hemoglobin, or you can have a condition known as sickle cell trait. People that have sickle cell anemia have severe symptoms that prevent them from leading a normal life. People that have sickle cell traits usually have a normal life, but they shouldn't marry anyone that also has sickle cell traits. And people that have normal hemoglobin can marry anyone they want. So next time we talk about sickle cell disease, we're going to try and go into some more detail, talk about the symptoms of sickle cell disease, talk about whatever happens in the case of sickle cell trait, and also talk about how you can test to ensure that you don't have sickle cell anemia or sickle cell trait. Thank you and see you next time.